Hello, I'm Susan Green, Associate Curator of Special Collections, Archives, and Research at the Philbrook Museum of Art, and I'm so glad that you have joined me today. We are doing Curators at Home, and we're looking at a room of the week. So we've been looking at a room in our historic villa, one of our galleries, and exploring what it looks like today, some historic images, maybe a little insider knowledge, or things that people don't usually notice when they're in the galleries. So when I was picking out a room to talk about this week, I must admit I was thinking about travel. I was thinking about trips, places that I've gone that I've loved to explore, and places that are within driving distance. I don't know why, but places where you can get out of town. Of course, we are at home, but that did inform what what gallery that I picked to talk about today. So I am going to share some images, to share some historic images and images of what the museum looks like today. So this is the front of Villa Philbrook when the family lived in the house, and the family is Waite Phillips and Genevieve Phillips and their children Helen, Jane, and Elliot. The museum, the building, was built by Edward Buehler Delk, and the family lived there from about 1927 until about 1938 when they decided to give their home away to be Tulsa's first art museum. So as you can see from the front, it is very Italianate in design, in architecture. It has ornate detailing. And if we go to our interior galleries, the Great Hall and this main hallway, you can see the painted ceilings, the twisted columns, the ornate plasterwork. But not all of the villa looks like this. So if you were to go into the Great Hall, hang a left, go down the staircase to the lower level, and the staircase is the one with the armor on the side. So you go down the staircase, hang a right, you'll end up in this gallery, the Santa Fe room. It looks completely different, much different from the rest of the museum. It's very reminiscent of Southwestern architecture. It has hand-laid irregular stone floor. It has plaster walls, but the walls almost have a rougher feel, or maybe more like adobe architecture. It has these beams that stretch across the ceiling, and as we sort of turn a little bit to our right and we look at the south wall, you can see these beams and how they're carved. The bracket is carved that holds up the beam. There's sort of flower or sun patterns and different repeating patterns across the beam. They are also augmented by pigment, so it's kind of a subtle red and a blue included on the beams. And then under these beams, there are these motifs, these designs made out of tiles inset into the walls. And these sort of bird motifs were actually designed by our architect, Edward Buehler Delk, but he's absolutely drawing on inspiration from the Southwest, from native pottery, native designs. But actually, these tile motifs were not, they are original to Philbrook, but they weren't original to this specific room. They were actually across the hall, in the gallery across the hall, but we'll get to that in a minute. So we have these large motifs, the beams, the floor, the walls. You can also see in this image this sort of a stepped piece of architecture that comes out from the wall perpendicular, and this is part of an inset bench that's on the south wall with niches, and it has a stepped design at the top reminiscent of Pueblo architecture. If we go to the right, so to the north wall, we can see the wall with a fireplace. So it has this kind of lovely rounded arch opening, reminiscent of adobe architecture, kiva fireplaces that have this lovely arch, but the fireplace, as in traditional European homes, is set into the wall, not sticking out into the room. And then we have birds inset on either side of the fireplace, or the fireplace opening. And then above the fireplace, something that is a part of our collection, this wonderful painting by Will Schuster. Will Schuster was a Santa Fe artist, so this is a nod to the name of the room, this historic name of the room. But let's look at the decorative arts, the furniture that's in the room. So you can see a set of chairs, a table, and let's look at a series of these images, these objects. So here we have several of the pieces of furniture that are in the room. There are other pieces that aren't included on this slide, but they're all kind of, they look similar in design. So the two images that are at the top, the high-backed chairs in this table, we know are by an artist named Ralph Myers. Ralph Myers lived in Taos. He was a painter, but he also owned a trading post, sold goods, sold artwork, and built furniture. He was a craftsman, and he also worked with craftsmen in the area to create furniture. And Mr. and Mrs. Phillips and our architect asked Myers to help in decorating and furnishing the room, the Santa Fe room. So the high-backed chairs and these lower-backed chairs, they're stretched with leather. The leather is painted with motifs, Southwestern motifs. They're stretched on these carved wooden frames, and they really are lovely. The carved wooden furniture, so this table, the bench, are substantial, have beautiful carvings. I love the table with its twisted legs, the little bun feet, and then the carved flowers across the table's apron, so kind of underneath the top surface of the table. It really is lovely, but it's substantial. It's big and heavy. It's quite a table. So this furniture is something that people often notice when they come into the room. So you see the furniture, you see the chairs, but there's some things that not everybody notices. So let's take a look. The fireplace. So we've got this lovely fireplace, right? But if you look closer, you can see that the fireplace screen actually has a design on it. It has an iron design, cut iron design that's included as part of the screen. And most of the fireplaces at Philbrook have some sort of design included in the screen. For example, the library, the screen on the fireplace, has a scholar sitting at a desk with a light. He's working by candlelight, the light of knowledge. It's absolutely appropriate for a library. Well, for here, on our fireplace screen, we have cacti. So you can see the large cactus stretching up to the left, and then a smaller cactus on the lower right. And this is a perfect, fun motif for this fireplace, but it didn't always look like this. We know that it actually had a different state originally, and we know that because of this. So when you look really closely at the cactus, maybe prickly pear that's down on the lower right, you can see that it actually originally was painted green, and even with little hash marks, little dark brush marks that maybe are reminiscent of thorns, prickles from the prickly pear on the paddles, or maybe just the undulation, the shape of the paddles. But you get this sense of the lovely green of the cacti, and I think it's so fun. It's this almost a humorous element. You have a fireplace and then the green cacti, and then it makes sense over the years with the heat of the fire, the color deteriorated, but we still have a little bit of a hint of the color there. Something else that I think a lot of people don't notice is this, the fireplace tools. So they're just to the right of the fireplace, and they've been with the Santa Fe room the whole time. They were part of the Phillips's property. But you get this lovely shape of the fireplace tools. They're not just any old fireplace tools. They are a work of art in themselves. So if you look at the top, there is a thunderbird with his wings outstretched. Down at the bottom, you have a lightning bolt. So there are these wonderful symbolic elements as part of these really heavy-duty, strong, large fireplace tools. And I love the idea that the thunderbird, that the lightning is helping to control the fire, helping to move the logs, poke the fire. So we've got the thunder and the lightning controlling the fire. I love that idea. So we've looked at some of these elements, the decorative arts, the furniture, the things not everybody notices, but what did the room look like when the Phillipses lived here? So let's look at a historic photograph. And here we go. So this is what it looked like when the Phillipses lived here. It's of course more full, it's a living space. We've got the tiles on the wall. We've got the beams across the ceiling, the fireplace, the furniture that is reminiscent of the Ralph Myers furniture, including the chair at the very front with the stretched leather and the wooden frame. But there are 4 things in this room that we don't have in the room today. And those are the comfy leather club chairs. So this is a living space. From legend, from oral history, we understand that the family really loved this room, especially Mr. Phillips, and they spent time in this room. And so you need comfortable chairs to sit in a den or a living space. So we've got these comfy leather club chairs, and there's usually some sort of small table next to it, so you can imagine them smoking, having a drink, being there with friends and family. But the room didn't always look like this. Something that a lot of people don't know is that the room changed over time while the Phillips lived there. They remodeled it at least once, probably a couple of times during their residence. So let's look at a side-by-side. So the image on the left is from about 1927, maybe 28, when the family had first moved into the house. And then the picture on the right is from the 30s probably. So sometime in the early 30s, they remodeled the space. And let's look at the differences. So in the ceiling especially, you see a lot of difference. So instead of just 4 beams going across, we have a whole series of these vigas. So these are very traditional forms for adobe architecture to support the ceiling, to support the plasterwork on top. But of course, we know that Villa Philbrook is made essentially of poured concrete and steel. It is not going anywhere. It doesn't need the beams across for structural support. These are all decorative. We also see that hanging from the ceiling are 2 large light fixtures. These light fixtures they took down from the Santa Fe room, and they actually moved one across the hall to the gallery where they had taken the tiles. So they swapped. But these are light fixtures hanging, and the shades are made of painted leather. So again, the Southwestern feel. We still have the wall, the textured wall, but instead of beams that are part of this kind of decorative structural support, this is where they've inset the tile birds. So switching up this sort of composition of the room. If we look on the other wall, we'll see this. So again, probably 1927, 28 probably, to the 30s. And you can see it looks much more visually full with the vigas. You can see kind of the fringe of the chandelier hanging down in the corner. Even the fireplace is a little different. So the fireplace, the tip of the fireplace is pointed early on, and then they smooth it, they round it out. So they make this room more streamlined, cleaner, less visually full. The fireplace itself in 1928 has niches for pottery, but they take those out. They streamline the wall, they make it smoother, they take out the niches, and then that's when they include the tile insets of these great birds on either side of the fireplace. And of course, we have to talk about what's above the fireplace. So in 1928, we have this huge mounted bison head. I will say that the Phillipses had a ranch in New Mexico, and on that ranch they were very cognizant that the bison were seemingly endangered. There was a call for helping to preserve the bison, and they had a bison herd or buffalo herd on the ranch, and it is probable that this buffalo was part of that herd. But they take it out, and instead they hang a painting. And this painting is still in the Philbrook collection. This is Voices of Springtime by Bert Phillips. And it is, again, this light color. It's more, much less heavy, visually intense as the buffalo or bison head. But this isn't, so when the Phillipses lived here, it was this living space. Of course, we know it as a gallery, but it had other uses. It's had lots of lives, the Santa Fe room. And I wonder if any of you remember this. So in the 70s and the 80s, the Santa Fe room was the museum gift shop. like many institutions, we had this historic building and we used every single room that we could in many different ways. If it wasn't a gallery, it was an office. If it wasn't an office, it was storage. If it wasn't storage, it was a studio space for classes. And they wanted to have a gift shop. And so they used the Santa Fe room. It was still absolutely visible as this beautiful space. You could still see the architecture, but you could also buy jewelry. The book selection apparently was amazing. Children's toys. And it was a beloved, definitely must see when you are visiting Philbrook. But of course, we know it as a gallery. And I want to talk about the work of art at the end of the room. So this large painting stretches across the end of the room, the east wall. It has been there since the Phillips lived there. It is inset into the wall now. We could take it out if we wanted to, but it's inset into the wall. It's stretched on canvas, and it was made by an artist named Oscar Burninghouse. And so let's see it in living color. Here it is. There's beautiful colors, this wonderful landscape, and this is actually a portrait. It's a portrait of land. So the Phillipses, when they were building Villa Philbrook, they also built at the same time a home on their ranch in New Mexico, just outside of Cimarron, New Mexico, which is between Taos and the Taos Ski Valley and the Texas border. So Cimarron just east of Taos. Nope. Yeah, just east of Taos. And they had this land, they loved it. So when they were building a home in Tulsa, they also built a home on their ranch. They called their home in Tulsa Philbrook. So it was the Phillips's home by the brook or the creek, Crow Creek in our backyard. In New Mexico, they called their ranch Philmont. So the Phillips's mountains. The home in the mountains. And Villa Philmonte is the building, is the home. And they use the same architect, the same general contractor, the same landscape architect, everything. And there are a lot of wonderful similarities between Philbrook and Villa Philmonte. But this is a portrait of their home. So Oscar Burninghouse recounted that he traveled out there in April, I believe, April or May of 1927. He met with Mr. Phillips. They rode on horseback across the property and looked at different vantage points of where to make this essentially portrait of a piece of land. And they, Burninghouse made sketches and notes, and they kind of put it together and decided on this vantage point. And it was so big that Burninghouse couldn't make it in the field, actually on site. He had to work on it in his studio. And let's look at the center portion of this painting and really look at the elements, the details of this portrait of a piece of land. So this this land formation that's in the center of the painting is this wonderful mountain peak, and the peak at the top with the kind of the light colored face is called the Tooth of Time. So this is a landmark, a historic landmark in the area, the Tooth of Time. If you look below the Tooth of Time, below this landmass, you can see two figures on horses coming up kind of over a rise, and they're herding bison, they're herding buffalo along this wonderful valley. We like to think it could be cowboys herding the bison. It could also be Mr. Phillips, maybe Elliot the son, and maybe Helen Jane and Genevieve are just coming up over the rise as well. So they loved exploring their property, Philmont, going into the backcountry, going on multi-day horse rides, treks. And just above them on the horses, you can see a line of trees. And just above the trees, there's a little bit of red and a little bit of white, or light colored. And those are the buildings. So that's Villa Philmonte and the outbuildings. So their home is nestled between the mountains and this valley. And when I traveled to New Mexico a couple of years ago, I love New Mexico. I love southern Colorado, the sweeping landscapes, the vegetation, the animals. But I was lucky enough a couple of years ago to go to Philmont to work with the staff to really explore the backcountry and their connection to the Phillips family. And I tried to find the exact location where Burning House crafted this image. Of course, I was not on horseback. I had to rely on the highways, and I did not get off the highway because I didn't have permission to get into the fields, but I think I'm at least a mile off. But you can see the Tooth of Time rising above on this mountain range. And then around the corner in the lower image, you can see the complex of Villa Philmonte and the buildings nestled in the valley, the foot of this valley, and get the sense of this beautiful, lush countryside. Of course, now Philmont is a property of the Boy Scouts of America, and Boy Scouts every year are lucky enough to get to go to Philmont, to trek into the wilderness, to learn life skills, and have an amazing adventures. And I would love to know if you've been to Philmont, to your experiences in Philmont and the connections with Philbrook as well. So I hope that you have many memories of travel, no matter what, from the town next door to across the world, maybe to New Mexico as well. We hope you've been to Philbrook and explored Philbrook and the Santa Fe Room. But we would also love you to think about other places you might go in your travels or your imaginary travels right now. And at some point, we hope you visit Philmont. We hope you come back and visit Philbrook and come down to the Santa Fe Room. Think about it as it was historically and think about it as it is today. But until then, we hope you're doing well. Stay safe at home, and let us know how you're doing. And check back regularly for all of our social media posts and all of our online programming. And we can't wait to see you in person, but until then, we'll see you over the airwaves. So thanks so much. Take care, and we'll see you next time.